So now we're taking a look at the worksheet that you have as an attachment, and we're seeing how you can use it to determine your fixed costs, variable costs, and your break-even point. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to start with fixed costs. The only cells we're going to edit are the yellow cells. Any other cell is going to update automatically, so we don't want to do anything with those. If you need additional cells included, you can always click on a number, right-click on it, and then go Insert, and it will insert a new row for you. And then that will automatically be included in the total. I've given you a couple of example items that you might want to include. Location, for example, if you're not going to be a home-based business, then you need to count that into play. Let's say, for example, that we're going to be located in the Kimberly area of Twin Falls. So we're going to estimate $1,500 a month in expenses. That gives us the cost of our location plus the cost of insurance and utilities. So anything having to do with location, we're just putting in as a bulk listed item for the moment. If you had vehicles that you used on a daily basis for your business, not for product delivery, but in the normal course of doing business, otherwise, for overhead purposes, you would list that here. And once again, we talked before about computer, so that was going to be $2,500 a month, $300 per year. And if we do 1,500 times 12, then that gives us our annual cost of $18,000 per year. We're going to assume an overhead cost of $25 a month for supplies, so that would bring us to $300 a year for supplies. If you had other costs, then you would include those as well. Let's see. Let's say that we are making aprons. So we have the cost of material and associated costs with that. So we might have thread and bobbins and things like that. And then we might also have replacement sewing machine, so that down the road we can purchase a new sewing machine if our sewing machine wears out. So we've done our homework. We know that a high-end machine is going to run about $1,500, and we've decided we want to pay that off in that first year. So we're going to divide 1,500 by 12, and that gives us our monthly figure. We want to have general material in stock that isn't associated with a specific job that we're working on. We might use it for marketing, we might make sample items, but we just want to have a certain amount of material in stock. So we're going to spend $50 a month. So equals 50 times 12. Now we have $600 a month set up for that. Once you have all of those items listed and you've had a chance to brainstorm, you've had a chance to do your homework, then you want to look back at your startup. What is it going to cost to be in that location? If you have a specific place in mind, you can talk to a realtor and you can find out what kind of pre-expenses there are, what kinds of deposits are required, what's included in the lease payment. Are they responsible for windows if something happens, or are you responsible if a window breaks? If there's flooding or damage, who's responsible for that? And on, so that you can determine the cost, the actual cost of doing business at that specific location. And in this case, we're going to say that the owner wants first and last as a deposit, so basically 2 months rent up front and then plus your monthly expense. So we're going to say that the rent itself is $700, so $1,400, and then you would have deposits for utilities and cable, for internet and things like that. We're going to say that's a $2,000 expense. For the computer, we're going to buy a computer ahead of time so that there's that $1,200 we had listed. We're not going to need a whole lot of money for expenses. We've looked at Office Depot and other areas where we're going to be getting supplies from, and we know that $100 will cover it. We want to make sure that we have a fair amount of material in stock ahead of time before we make our aprons, so we're going to spend $300 on buying some material. And we have a sewing machine that we're saving for, but we've decided that we want a new one to start with. So we know that it's going to cost, before we get going, about $5,100, and then for our first year we need to bring in at least $20,700, and our monthly overhead is $1,725. So now we have to determine our personal items as we did in the video. So we don't want to work too many hours in a day. We've decided we're going to sew 6 hours in a day. We're going to work 4 days a week, and we're going to work 4 weeks a month. So that tells me that I need to work 96 hours in a month to cover my expenses, and I have to charge, and I want to round this. So I'm going to round it to $18 per hour to meet my expenses. Now, I've already priced custom sewing, and I know that for my high-end gorgeous aprons, I can get $22 an hour. So that means my maximum monthly income based on market is going to be $2,112. I'm done with this form, and I'm ready to move to the next one, which, as you can see, is variable costs or cost of goods. And in this case, I'm going to be determining the actual cost of making an individual apron. So for my apron, I use 2 yards of fabric, and I'm going to be paying $8 a yard, so there's $16 of fabric. I'm going to have thread and needles and bobbin and miscellaneous items, and they call those notions, and that's going to be roughly $1. Just to make sure that it's covered. And then I don't want to do this instantly because I want to be able to make sure that I'm covering all of my expenses. So I might leave this aside, come back, and were there anything of the other items that I needed to include for my cost of goods? Oh, that's right. I deliver my finished aprons. So delivery, and I'm going to charge $5 per apron for delivery. So that means my cost per unit is $22. And this gives me what I need to include and what I don't need to include. In my break-even analysis then, the only number I need to list here is my sales price per unit. My costs are $22, and I want to at least triple my income. That way, if I do end up at some point selling wholesale, I still have enough leeway to be able to make a good profit. So I'm going to say $65 is my price per unit. So by doing that, that tells me that I need to make 40 aprons in a month, and that will bring me to my break-even point of $2,608, including my cost of goods. And then my graph automatically updates and shows that point where those two items intersect. If I change my price per unit, maybe I find that I can charge $70 a piece. So then that would automatically update. And then I can also come back to the other items and I can adjust. Maybe I can't pay that cost per yard of fabric because I can't charge that much for an apron. So maybe I need to find material that's no more than $4 a yard so that I can cut my costs down to $14. And then that allows me to adjust my price down to $29 each. So you play with your numbers and you see where you need to be. But make sure that you leave enough leeway in your price per unit so that if there are things that creep in, you can adjust. These numbers are not written in stone. You can update and change them, and you will likely make changes all the way until you are ready to submit your final business plan. Because as you do your sales flow and some of the other financial documents, you'll see that some things might need to make some changes.